I gave her every document, every dollar she asked for. She said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of everything." 2 months later, I got a letter from immigration telling me I had 7 days to leave the country, and Priya, she vanished. This is my confession about how retirement in paradise became my nightmare. I'm sitting on my balcony, watching Bangkok's skyline turn gold as the sun dips behind the buildings. The air conditioning hums softly behind me, but I prefer this warm evening breeze on my face. There's a cold soda in my hand, condensation dripping down the glass, and for the first time in 30 years, I don't have to wake up tomorrow for anyone but myself. No boss breathing down my neck. No ex-wife asking where I've been. Just me, Milton, a 65-year-old mechanical engineer who finally figured out how to live. I wasn't planning to reopen this wound, but earlier this week, I received an email from a longtime viewer of this channel. He told me he'd been following these stories for months quietly, faithfully, and finally decided to send me his own. Reading his words, I felt my stomach twist. At first, it was shock seeing how closely his situation mirrored mine. Then a wave of sadness, not just for him but for the man I used to be. And finally a strange kind of gratitude, because his courage to write reminded me that none of us walk this road alone. That email pulled me back here tonight, to sit in front of this camera and open up once again, and I want to take a moment to say this. Thank you. To every single one of you watching right now, whether this is your first video or your 50th, thank you for being here. Drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're watching from. I love seeing those messages come in from across the globe. And if you've been with me for a while, if you keep showing up, story after story, this is my super thank you to you. You're the reason I can keep sharing these confessions. Please like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and join the conversation. Because tonight, I'm going to tell you everything. Let me take you back to where it all started. You picked the right place to restart your life. Priya steps onto the balcony beside me, her smile catching the last rays of sunlight. She's wearing that blue dress I bought her last week, the one that makes her eyes look like deep water. Bangkok suits you. I turned to look at her, still amazed that someone like her would choose to spend time with someone like me. I never thought I'd say this, but leaving Canada was the best decision I ever made. She sits down in the chair next to mine, close enough that I can smell her perfume mixing with the street food aromas drifting up from below. Your divorce was hard, wasn't it? 30 years down the drain. I take another sip of my soda. But now I understand what people mean when they say everything happens for a reason. What reason is that? Her voice has this way of making every question sound important. Meeting you. The words come out before I can stop them, and I feel like a teenager again. I mean, if I hadn't gotten divorced, I never would have moved here. Never would have needed help with my visa. Never would have found your name in that Facebook group. Priya laughs, and it's the kind of sound that makes you want to hear it again immediately. You were so lost when you first messaged me. Remember? You said you had 30 days on your tourist visa and didn't know where to start. I was terrified, I admit. All these forms, requirements, bank statements. Thai bureaucracy isn't exactly friendly to foreigners. But I helped you, didn't I? She reaches over and touches my hand. Your retirement visa came through perfectly. Your bank account opened without any problems. No stress. I squeeze her fingers. You made it look easy. That's what I do. She stands up and moves behind my chair, her hands resting on my shoulders. I take care of people who deserve a better life. Looking out at the city lights beginning to flicker on, I feel something I haven't experienced in years. Peace. Real peace. Not the kind you get from avoiding problems, but the kind that comes from knowing you're exactly where you belong. I used to lie awake at night in Toronto, wondering if this was all there was. Work, mortgage payments, arguments about money. And now I sleep like a baby. I lean back into her touch. Amazing what a little sunshine and the right person can do. You deserve this, Milton. Her voice is soft, almost a whisper. You worked hard your whole life, raised kids who barely call you, supported a wife who threw it all away. I don't want to think about the divorce tonight. About the lawyers and the splitting of assets and the way she looked at me during those final months like I was a stranger. Let's not talk about that. I'm just saying you deserve to be happy. Priya's hands move to massage my neck gently. You deserve someone who appreciates you. The word someone hangs in the air between us. We've been dancing around this for weeks now, ever since our professional relationship started feeling personal. since the dinners became dates and the dates became something more. Do you appreciate me? She leans down and kisses the top of my head. What do you think? I think I'm falling in love at 65 years old. I think I'm finally understanding what all those songs and movies were talking about. But I don't say any of that because it feels too big, too soon, too much like something that could disappear if I name it out loud. I think I'm glad I picked this apartment, I say instead. Best view in the city. The view is nice, she agrees, but when I look up at her, she's not looking at the skyline, she's looking at me. This is it. I realize. This is what I've been searching for, without knowing I was searching. Not just retirement, not just escape from my old life, but this feeling of being seen, being chosen, being cared for by someone who doesn't have to care. Someone who could have anyone but somehow picked me. The street noise below fades into background music. The heat that used to feel overwhelming now feels like a warm embrace. Even the language barrier that intimidated me when I first arrived doesn't matter anymore, because Priya speaks perfect English, and she's teaching me Thai words slowly, patiently, like she has all the time in the world. Stay tonight, I say, and it's not really a question. I was hoping you'd ask. She comes around to face me, and in the fading light, she looks like everything I never knew I wanted. But I should warn you, I might get used to this. Used to what? Being taken care of. She gestures to the apartment, to the view, to me. You're very good at making a woman feel special. I stand up and pull her closer, and she doesn't resist. You are special, even when I'm bossy about your paperwork? Especially then. I mean it. There's something incredibly attractive about competence, about someone who can navigate systems I find baffling, who can make phone calls in 3 languages and somehow get results. You saved me from so much stress, and you saved me from a very boring evening. She's smiling, but there's something serious in her eyes. Milton, I want you to know that this isn't how I usually do business. What do you mean? Getting involved with clients. It's not professional. She pauses. But with you, it doesn't feel like business anymore. My heart does something I thought it had forgotten how to do. What does it feel like? Like the beginning of something real. As we stand there on the balcony, Bangkok humming with life below us, I finally understand what people mean when they say they found their person. Not the person they settled for, or the person who was convenient, or the person who fit their timeline. The person who makes everything else make sense. I kiss her then, soft and careful, and she kisses me back with a certainty that tells me she's been waiting for this moment too. When we break apart, I'm smiling so wide it hurts. Welcome home, Milton, she whispers. And for the first time in 65 years, I truly feel like I am. 3 months earlier, I was sitting in my cramped Toronto apartment, scrolling through a Facebook group called Expat Retirees Thailand at 2 a.m. The divorce papers were final, the house was sold, and I had exactly 37 days to figure out the rest of my life. The group was full of stories from guys like me, men who'd worked their whole lives and decided to stretch their pensions somewhere warm. That's when I saw her post. Visa assistance for retirees. 15 years experience. No stress, no hassles, reasonable rates. Message me for consultation. The profile picture showed a professional-looking Thai woman with kind eyes and a confident smile. Her name was Priya. I stared at that post for 20 minutes before getting the courage to send her a message. Hi, I'm Milton from Canada. Just divorced, looking to retire in Bangkok but completely lost about visa requirements. Any help would be appreciated. She replied within an hour, which shocked me. Hello, Milton. Sorry to hear about your divorce, but congratulations on choosing Thailand for your retirement. It's a wonderful decision. I'd be happy to help you navigate the process. Can you call me tomorrow? I'll walk you through everything step by step. The next morning, my hands were shaking as I dialed her number. I expected some rushed conversation with someone trying to sell me services I didn't understand. Instead, Priya answered on the second ring with perfect English and infinite patience. Milton, good morning. How are you feeling about the move? Terrified, honestly. The admission slipped out before I could stop it. I've never done anything like this before. That's completely normal. Her voice was warm, reassuring. Every expat feels that way at first. But you chose Thailand, which means you're braver than you think. For the next hour, she explained everything. Tourist visas, retirement visas, financial requirements, health insurance, bank account procedures. She didn't try to rush me or pressure me into paying her immediately. She just talked me through it like she genuinely wanted to help. The most important thing, she said, is that you don't have to do this alone. I've helped hundreds of retirees make this transition smoothly. What exactly do you charge for something like this? We can discuss fees later. Right now, let's just focus on getting you to Bangkok safely. Once you're here and settled, we'll figure out the rest. That generosity floored me. After months of lawyers billing me for every 5-minute phone call, here was someone offering to help first and worry about payment later. I flew to Bangkok 2 weeks later with her phone number saved in my contacts and a list of documents she'd helped me prepare. She met me at the airport, which I hadn't expected. Most consultants would have just given me directions to their office. Milton? A woman approached me in the arrivals area, and I recognized her immediately from her photos. Priya was smaller than I'd imagined, but her presence was commanding. Professional blazer, confident handshake, and that same warm smile from her profile picture. Priya. Thank you so much for meeting me here. Of course. Welcome to Thailand. She took one of my suitcases without asking. How was the flight? Long, but I'm here. Looking around at the bustling airport, hearing Thai conversations flowing around me, seeing signs I couldn't read, I felt that familiar panic creeping in. This is really happening. Yes, it is. She started walking toward the exit. And it's going to be wonderful. I have a car waiting to take you to your hotel, and tomorrow we'll start getting everything sorted. The hotel she'd booked was perfect. Clean, affordable, in a neighborhood full of other expats. She'd thought of everything. I'll pick you up at 10 tomorrow morning, she said, as we stood in the lobby. We'll go to the bank first, then immigration, then I'll show you some apartments if you're feeling up to it. You don't have to spend your whole day with me. Milton, this is my job. She smiled. But more than that, I want you to succeed here. Thailand changes people's lives, but only if they get the foundation right from the beginning. The next morning, she showed up exactly on time, in a small sedan, dressed casually but still somehow looking more put together than I ever managed. Ready for your first real day as a Bangkok resident? Ready as I'll ever be. The bank visit that I'd been dreading turned into a pleasant conversation. Priya translated everything, explained each form, and somehow convinced them to waive fees I didn't even know existed. Within 2 hours, I had a Thai bank account with my pension, automatically depositing every month. How did you make that look so easy? I asked as we walked back to her car. Experience. And they know me here. She paused. Also, you're a good candidate. Steady income, clean background, genuine retirement plans. Banks like that. At the immigration office, the same magic happened. Forms I couldn't read became simple checkboxes. Requirements that seemed impossible became routine procedures. Priya spoke rapidly in Thai with various officials, all of whom seemed to respect her. Your retirement visa will be ready in 2 weeks, she told me afterward. Until then, you're legal on your tourist visa. No stress. I can't believe how smooth this has been. This is just the beginning. We were sitting in a small restaurant near the immigration office, sharing pad thai and iced coffee. Wait until you see some apartments. I have 3 lined up for this afternoon, all in areas I think you'll love. The first apartment was nice but too small. The second was too expensive. The third was perfect. High floor, great view, fully furnished, and somehow within my budget. The owner is a friend of mine, Priya explained. She gives good rates to people I recommend. Why are you being so nice to me? The question had been bothering me all day. I mean, I appreciate it, but this feels like way more than a business transaction. She considered this carefully. Honestly, most of my clients are angry, stressed, or treating me like hired help. You're different. You're grateful. You listen, and you're trying to build a real life here, not just escape from something. I am trying to escape from something. Yes, but you're also trying to move towards something. That's not the same thing. She sipped her coffee. Plus, you remind me of my father. He was an engineer too. That evening, she insisted on taking me to dinner at a local place that definitely wasn't in any tourist guidebooks. The food was incredible, the prices were ridiculous, and Priya seemed to know half the people there. This is my neighborhood, she explained. I grew up 3 blocks from here. It's wonderful. Very authentic. She laughed. You don't have to use tourist words with me, Milton. You can just say it's different from what you expected. It is different from what I expected. I looked around at families sharing meals, kids running between tables, grandparents holding babies. It feels like community. That's Thailand. We take care of each other. She caught my eye across the table. And we take care of people who are trying to become part of the community. Something shifted in that moment. The way she looked at me, the way she said, "We," like I might actually belong somewhere again. After months of feeling like a stranger in my own life, here was someone suggesting I could be part of something bigger. "Priya, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever get lonely doing this work? Helping people start new lives while you stay in the same place?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Sometimes, but seeing people like you find happiness here, that helps." "People like me? People who deserve a second chance." I wanted to reach across the table and take her hand, but that felt like crossing a line we hadn't established yet. Instead, I just said, "Thank you for everything today, for making this feel possible. Milton, this is just day one." Her smile returned, brighter than before. "Wait until you see what's coming next." Walking back to my hotel that night, Bangkok didn't feel foreign anymore. It felt like possibility. And Priya didn't feel like a consultant anymore. She felt like hope. 2 weeks later, I was officially a legal resident of Thailand, with a shiny new retirement visa in my passport. Priya had handled everything flawlessly, just like she promised. But instead of our professional relationship ending, it seemed to be evolving into something else entirely. "I have an idea," she said as we celebrated with dinner at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Chao Phraya River. "What if I handled all your future immigration needs? Renewals, extensions, any changes you might need. For a flat monthly fee, you never have to worry about paperwork again." "That sounds expensive. $500 a month." She leaned back in her chair, confidence radiating from her. "Think about it. No stress, no confusion, no standing in government lines. I take care of everything, and you just focus on enjoying your retirement." I did the math quickly. It was more than I'd budgeted for visa services, but the peace of mind seemed worth it. And you'd handle absolutely everything. Everything. Plus, I'd keep your passport safe between renewals so you don't lose it or damage it. She paused. "Milton, I've been doing this for 15 years. I know every rule, every exception, every shortcut. You'll never have immigration problems again." "Okay." The word came out before I'd fully thought it through. "Let's do it." Her smile lit up her entire face. "Really? Really? You've taken such good care of me already. Why would I trust anyone else?" She reached across the table and took my hand. "You won't regret this." That night, she came back to my apartment for the first time. Nothing happened, not exactly, but she stayed late enough that I offered her the couch instead of calling a taxi. In the morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and something that might have been breakfast. "You didn't have to cook," I said, finding her in my kitchen wearing one of my oversized t-shirts. "I wanted to." She handed me a cup of coffee made exactly how I liked it. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you're eating properly." "How do you know how I like my coffee?" "I pay attention." She was making scrambled eggs, moving around my kitchen like she belonged there. "You take it black with just a little sugar. You eat your toast dark but not burned. You like your eggs slightly runny." The fact that she'd noticed these details sent something warm through my chest. "You're very observant. It's part of my job to understand people." She plated the eggs and sat down across from me at my small table. "But with you, it doesn't feel like work anymore." "What does it feel like?" She considered this. "Like taking care of someone I actually want to take care of." Over the following weeks, those breakfasts became routine. Priya would come by in the evenings, sometimes with documents to review, sometimes with takeout from new restaurants she wanted me to try, and somehow she'd always end up staying until morning. "I should probably get my own toothbrush here," she said one morning, using her finger to brush her teeth. "There's an extra one in the medicine cabinet." "You keep spare toothbrushes?" "I keep spare everything. 30 years of marriage teaches you to be prepared." I paused. "But you can have the blue one. I bought it hoping someone might need it someday." "Someone like me?" "Someone exactly like you." She moved closer to me in the bathroom mirror, and I could see both of our reflections looking back. Hers young and confident, mine older but somehow more alive than I'd felt in years. "Milton, are we doing something crazy here?" "Probably." I turned to face her directly. "Does that bother you?" "No." She stepped closer. "Does it bother you?" Instead of answering, I kissed her. Not the careful, tentative kiss of someone afraid of rejection, but the kiss of someone who'd finally found what he'd been missing. She kissed me back with equal certainty, and I knew we'd crossed whatever line we'd been dancing around. "I should tell you something," she said afterward. "I've never gotten involved with a client before." "Never?" "Never. It's unprofessional, it's complicated, and it usually ends badly." She touched my face gently. "But I've never had a client like you. What's different about me? You see me, not just as someone who can help you, but as a person." She was quiet for a moment. "Most foreigners treat me like a service. You treat me like a human being." That afternoon, she showed me her real apartment for the first time. It was smaller than mine, but filled with personal touches that made it feel like a home. Books in multiple languages, photographs of family, plants that were obviously well cared for. "This is beautiful," I said, looking around. "Why don't you spend more time here?" "Honestly, because yours feels more like home now." She was unpacking groceries she'd brought. "Is that weird?" "No." I sat down on her couch, surprised by how comfortable it felt. "It's not weird at all." "Good, because I was thinking maybe I could keep some clothes at your place, for convenience." "Just for convenience?" She smiled that smile that had been slowly driving me crazy for weeks. "Maybe not just for convenience." That evening, we had what I came to think of as our first real date. Not a business dinner or a casual meal, but an actual romantic evening. She wore a dress I'd never seen before, something that looked expensive and special. I wore the nicest shirt I'd packed, which suddenly seemed inadequate. "You look beautiful," I told her as we walked into the restaurant. "You look nervous." "I am nervous." We were seated at a table by the window, candlelight flickering between us. "I haven't been on a real date in over 30 years. This is a real date, isn't it?" She reached across the table and took my hand. "Milton, I need to tell you something." My stomach dropped. "What?" "I'm falling in love with you." The relief was so intense I almost laughed. "Thank God. I thought you were going to tell me this was all a mistake." "You're not a mistake." She squeezed my hand. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in years." Later that night, back at my apartment, she moved more of her things into my closet. Not everything, but enough to make it clear this wasn't temporary anymore. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, watching her hang up dresses next to my button-down shirts. "Are you?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She turned to face me, and in the dim light of my bedroom, she looked like everything I'd given up hope of finding. "Then, let's stop overthinking it." The next morning, she was gone before I woke up, but there was a note on my pillow. "Had to handle some client business. Your visa renewal paperwork is on the kitchen table. Trust me to take care of everything. Love, P." I read that note 5 times, focusing on the word love, until it started to feel real. Then I looked at the papers she'd left. Forms in Thai and English, official-looking documents with government seals, a checklist in her handwriting. I didn't understand most of it, but I didn't need to. Priya understood it, and I trusted her completely. That trust felt like the most natural thing in the world. 2 days later, I handed her $3,000 in cash for the renewal process and what she called legal assistance fees. "This covers everything?" I asked. "Everything," she confirmed. "Your visa will be renewed for another year. No problems, no stress." "What would I do without you?" "You'll never have to find out." She kissed me goodbye and took my passport along with the money. "I'll have everything back to you within 2 weeks." As I watched her leave that morning, I felt something I'd forgotten was possible: complete security. Not just financial security or legal security, but emotional security. The knowledge that someone capable and caring was handling the complicated parts of my life so I could focus on the good parts. I was finally living the retirement dream I'd imagined, with a woman who made every day feel like an adventure. What could possibly go wrong? It started small. Text messages that took a few hours longer to get responses. Dinner plans that got postponed at the last minute. "Sorry, running late with another client." Priya texted me on a Tuesday evening when she was supposed to come over at 7. "Maybe tomorrow instead?" I understood. Business was business, and I'd never wanted to be the kind of man who got jealous of his girlfriend's work. But by Thursday, when she'd canceled 3 times in a row, something felt different. "Is everything okay?" I called her that evening instead of texting. "Of course. Why? We haven't seen each other since Sunday." "That's not like us." There was a pause. Milton, I told you I'm swamped with client work right now. End of the month is always busy for visa stuff. I know, I just miss you. I miss you too. Her voice softened. How about this weekend? I'll make it up to you. Friday came and went with no word from her. Saturday morning I sent a text, still on for tonight? She replied 4 hours later. Something came up. Rain check? I stared at that message for a long time. Something came up wasn't like Priya. She was specific, detailed, organized. She planned everything and communicated constantly. This felt like avoidance. Sunday evening, I decided to stop by her apartment. I'd never just shown up unannounced before, but we were practically living together. Surely, that gave me some right to check on her when she was being so distant. I knocked on her door for 5 minutes. No answer. Her motorcycle wasn't in its usual parking spot. Walking back to my own place, I tried to push down the anxiety building in my chest. There were 100 innocent explanations. She was working late. She was with family. She was dealing with some emergency I didn't know about. But the pit in my stomach suggested otherwise. Monday morning, I called her office number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried her cell phone. Same thing. By Tuesday, I was genuinely worried. I'd sent 6 text messages with no response. This wasn't like her at all. The Priya I knew would never leave me hanging like this, especially when she knew I was relying on her for something as important as my visa renewal. Hey, it's me again, I said to her voicemail. I'm starting to get concerned. Can you please just call me back and let me know you're okay? I don't need a long conversation, just confirmation that you're alive. Wednesday brought the first real red flag. I was walking through the mall near my apartment when I saw her. She was sitting in a coffee shop with a Western man I'd never seen before, both of them leaning over papers spread across the table. She was smiling, engaged, animated in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. I stood there for 5 minutes, watching them through the window. She looked up once and our eyes met across the crowded space. Her smile faltered. She said something to the man, gathered up the papers quickly, and they left through a different exit. My phone buzzed with a text from her. Saw you at the mall. Sorry I couldn't stop to chat. Was in a work meeting. Call you later. She didn't call later. Thursday, I tried a different approach. Instead of calling or texting, I went to the immigration office where we'd done all my paperwork. Maybe someone there could tell me about the status of my visa renewal. Excuse me, I said to the clerk who'd processed my original application. I'm checking on the status of my visa renewal. It was submitted a few weeks ago through a consultant named Priya. The clerk looked at my passport number on her computer screen, frowned, typed something else, frowned deeper. I'm not seeing any renewal application under your name or passport number. That can't be right. My consultant submitted everything weeks ago. What was the consultant's full name? Priya. I don't actually know her last name. As I said it, I realized how ridiculous that sounded. Sir, there's no recent activity on your file. Your current visa expires in 3 weeks. The world tilted slightly. That's impossible. She told me it was being processed. I'm sorry, but there's nothing here. If you'd like to submit a renewal application, you'll need to start the process immediately. I walked out of that office in a daze. There had to be some mistake. Maybe she'd submitted it to a different office. Maybe there was a computer error. Maybe the clerk had looked up the wrong file. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to accept it yet. That evening, I went back to Priya's apartment building. This time I waited in the lobby until someone came out, then slipped inside before the door closed. I took the elevator to her floor and knocked on her door with more force than I'd intended. Priya, I know you're in there. We need to talk. Nothing. I went to immigration today. They said you never submitted my renewal application. Still nothing. Look, I don't know what's going on, but I need my passport back. And I need to understand what happened to the money I gave you. Silence. I stood in that hallway for 20 minutes, knocking periodically, calling her name, feeling more foolish and desperate with each passing moment. Finally, a neighbor opened his door. She moved out last week, he said, in heavily accented English. Moved out? Where? He shrugged. Don't know. Packed everything very quickly. Walking back to my apartment, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the worst days of my divorce, the sick realization that someone I trusted completely had been lying to me. The difference was, when my marriage fell apart, I was still in my own country with my own support system and legal protections. Now I was alone in a foreign country, and the person who was supposed to be protecting me had vanished along with my passport and $3,000. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation we'd had, looking for signs I'd missed. The way she'd insisted on keeping my passport, the vague explanations about processing times, her sudden distance over the past few weeks. How could I have been so stupid? But even as that thought formed, another part of my mind pushed back. She'd helped me successfully the first time. She'd been professional, competent, caring. The romantic relationship that developed between us had felt genuine, spontaneous, real. Maybe there was still an innocent explanation. Maybe she was dealing with some crisis I didn't understand. Maybe tomorrow she'd call with apologies and explanations that would make everything make sense again. I held on to that hope for exactly 12 more hours. The envelope was sitting on my floor when I woke up, slipped under my door sometime during the night. Official government seal. My name and address typed in formal letters. The weight of it in my hands felt like a death sentence. My fingers shook as I tore it open. The letter was in Thai with an English translation attached. I read the English version 3 times before the words finally penetrated. Notice to foreign national. Your current visa status is expired and invalid. No renewal application has been received. You have 7 days from receipt of this notice to depart the Kingdom of Thailand or face deportation proceedings and lifetime ban from re-entry. I sank into my kitchen chair, still holding the letter. 7 days. My visa had expired yesterday, and somehow immigration had figured out that no renewal had been submitted despite the $3,000 I'd given Priya specifically for that purpose. The first thing I did was call her. Straight to voicemail, but this time I didn't leave a message. I hung up and immediately called back. Voicemail again, and again. Then I started texting. Priya, I need you to call me right now. Immigration, emergency. Nothing. I got a deportation notice. Where is my passport? Where is my visa renewal? Nothing. I have 7 days to leave Thailand. Please respond. Nothing. By noon, I'd sent 15 messages and made 20 phone calls. Every single one went unanswered. I grabbed my keys and headed to her apartment building, knowing she wouldn't be there but needing to try anyway. The neighbor who'd told me she moved out was getting his mail. Excuse me, I called to him. Did she leave any forwarding information? Any way to contact her? He shook his head. Sorry. She paid rent through the end of the month, then disappeared. Very strange. Did she seem upset? Like she was running from something? No, not upset. More like, in a hurry. Like she had somewhere important to be. Back in my apartment, I sat on my couch and tried to think logically. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe she was sick. Maybe there was a family emergency. Maybe she was trying to fix my visa situation and couldn't talk to me until she had good news. But even as I told myself these things, I knew I was grasping at fantasies. I opened my laptop and started Googling visa consultant Thailand problems and Thai immigration scams. What I found made my blood run cold. Forums full of stories exactly like mine. Foreign retirees who'd trusted consultants with their passports and money, only to have them disappear. Post after post describing the same pattern. Initial competence and charm, followed by romantic involvement, followed by larger payments and possession of documents, followed by silence. One post from a British man caught my attention. She called herself Priya and claimed to have 15 years of experience. Took my passport and $0 for visa renewal. When I got the deportation notice, she was gone. Police said there's nothing they can do because technically I gave her the money voluntarily. The profile picture showed a woman who looked exactly like my Priya. I scrolled through the comments. More victims. Different amounts of money but the same story over and over. She was using multiple names, multiple identities, but always the same beautiful face and confident demeanor. She's still out there. Someone had posted just 2 months ago. Saw her at Siam Paragon with another Western man, probably her next victim. My hands were shaking as I closed the laptop. Everything I thought I knew about Priya, about us, about my life in Bangkok, was a lie. She wasn't a legitimate consultant who'd fallen in love with me. She was a professional scammer who targeted lonely foreign men, and I'd walked into her trap with my eyes wide open. The romantic dinners, the nights she stayed over, the way she looked at me like I was special, all of it had been performance. calculated manipulation designed to make me trust her completely. I thought about the morning she'd made me breakfast, how domestic and natural it had felt. The way she'd moved around my kitchen like she belonged there. Had she been cataloging my habits, learning my weaknesses, figuring out exactly how to make me dependent on her? "You see me as a person," she'd said. What a joke. I'd been seeing a person who didn't even exist. That afternoon, I forced myself to go to the Thai immigration office. Maybe there was still something that could be done. Maybe if I explained the situation, showed them proof that I'd been scammed, they'd give me more time to sort things out. The same clerk who'd told me about my missing application recognized me immediately. "You're back. Did you find your consultant?" "No, she's disappeared. Along with my passport and my money." I handed her the deportation notice. "Is there anything I can do? Any way to extend this deadline?" She read the notice carefully, then looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. "I'm very sorry, but this is final. 7 days is all we can give you." But I was scammed. I'm a victim here. Yes, I understand. But immigration law doesn't make exceptions for fraud. Your visa status is illegal now, regardless of the circumstances. What about my passport? I can't leave the country without it. You'll need to go to your embassy. They can issue emergency travel documents. She paused. "Sir, can I give you some advice?" I nodded. "This happens more often than you might think. Always keep your passport with you. Never give large amounts of cash to anyone, even if you trust them. And be very careful about mixing business with romance. Too little, too late." But I appreciated the kindness in her voice. The Canadian embassy was a nightmare of bureaucracy and fees, but they confirmed they could issue me emergency travel documents within 3 days. The cost would be $500, money I couldn't really afford after losing $3,000 to Priya. "This type of scam is unfortunately common," the embassy worker told me. "We see several cases like this every month." Every month? Thai authorities are aware of the problem, but it's difficult to prosecute because technically the victims gave money voluntarily to people they were in relationships with. So she'll never face any consequences? Probably not. She'll likely just change her name and move to a different area of the city. That evening, I sat in my apartment looking around at the life I'd built in just a few months. The furniture I'd bought, the routines I'd established, the sense of home I'd finally found. In 5 days, all of it would be gone. I tried calling Priya one more time, knowing it was pointless but unable to stop myself. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." She'd even changed her phone number. I poured myself a drink and stepped out onto the balcony where this whole nightmare had started, where she'd told me I'd picked the right place to restart my life, where I'd felt so confident about my future, so grateful for my luck in finding her. Bangkok sparkled below me, beautiful and indifferent. The same view that had filled me with hope now felt like a mockery. I'd been so naive, so desperate to believe that someone like Priya could genuinely care about someone like me. The worst part wasn't the money, though $3,000 was a significant chunk of my pension. The worst part wasn't even the legal trouble, though deportation would complicate any future travel plans. The worst part was the humiliation. The knowledge that while I'd been falling in love, she'd been calculating her next move. While I'd been planning a future together, she'd been planning her exit strategy. I'd spent 65 years thinking I was reasonably good at reading people, at understanding motivations, at protecting myself from obvious threats. Apparently, I'd been wrong about all of that. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Milton, this is Priya. I'm sorry for disappearing. There's been a family emergency and I had to leave Bangkok suddenly. I'll contact you soon to explain everything." For just a moment, hope flared in my chest. Maybe there really was an explanation. Maybe I'd been wrong about everything. Then I noticed the message had been sent from a different country code. She wasn't even in Thailand anymore. I deleted the message without responding. The law office was in a gleaming tower in downtown Bangkok, the kind of place that charged by the minute just to sit in the waiting room. I'd found them through a Google search for immigration lawyers Thailand, and their website promised they could handle complex visa situations for foreign nationals. "Mr. Milton?" A young Thai woman in an expensive suit appeared in the waiting area. "I'm Kun Siraporn. Please come with me." Her office was all glass and steel, with certificates covering one wall and a view of the Chao Phraya River that probably cost more than my monthly pension. She gestured for me to sit across from her massive desk. "I understand you're having some immigration difficulties?" I handed her the deportation notice and explained everything. The visa consultant, the romantic relationship, the missing passport, the $3,000, the discovery that none of my paperwork had ever been filed. She listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and sighed. "Mr. Milton, I'm very sorry to tell you this, but you're not the first person to come to me with this exact story." "What do you mean?" "The woman you described using the name Priya, claiming 15 years of experience, developing romantic relationships with her clients. She's been operating this scam for at least 3 years that I know of." She turned to her computer and pulled up a file. "I've represented 7 other men in situations nearly identical to yours. All Western retirees, all recently divorced or widowed, all approached through expat Facebook groups." My stomach dropped. 7 others? That's just the ones who've come to me. I suspect there are many more who never reported it or never sought legal help. She turned her monitor so I could see it. Here's what I can tell you about her pattern. The screen showed a timeline with dates and brief descriptions. Different names, but the same methodology repeated over and over. She targets men who are new to Thailand, usually older, usually recently single. She builds trust through successful completion of legitimate visa work initially. Then she develops a romantic relationship. Once emotional attachment is established, she requests larger payments for more complex services. And then she disappears? Usually right before the victim's visa expires, yes. By the time they realize what's happened, she's already moved on to her next target. I felt sick. How is she getting away with this? Several reasons. First, there's the embarrassment factor. Many victims don't want to admit they were both financially and romantically scammed. Second, the romantic element makes it difficult to prove fraud. She can claim the money was gifts between lovers. Third, she's very careful about documentation. She always provides some legitimate services initially, which gives her credibility. But surely the police can do something? Kun Siraporn shook her head. Thai police tend to view these as civil matters rather than criminal ones. Unless there's clear evidence of identity theft or document forgery, they usually won't investigate. So, she just keeps doing this to people? I'm afraid so. She pulled out another file. Would you like to hear from some of my other clients? I think it might help you understand that this wasn't your fault. For the next hour, she shared stories that were eerily similar to mine. Different details, different amounts of money, but the same basic pattern of trust, romance, and betrayal. There was David from Australia, she said, 72 years old, widowed. She took him for $8,000 and his passport. He had to live in a temple for 2 weeks while waiting for emergency documents because he couldn't afford a hotel. And James from the UK, 68, recently retired. She convinced him to invest in a fake property deal in addition to the visa services, lost his entire pension fund before he realized what was happening. Each story was a variation on my own nightmare. Men who thought they'd found love and security, only to discover they'd been carefully selected and methodically exploited. The most heartbreaking case was Robert from New Zealand, Kun Siraporn continued. She convinced him to marry her. He spent $15,000 on the wedding, the visa process, and setting up what he thought would be their life together. She disappeared the day after the ceremony. Jesus. I put my head in my hands. How could we all be so stupid? Mr. Milton, you weren't stupid. You were human. Her voice was gentler now. She's very good at what she does. She studies her targets carefully, learns exactly what they need to hear, creates elaborate personas tailored to each victim's specific vulnerabilities. But there had to be warning signs. In hindsight, yes. But she's skilled at explaining away inconsistencies. And she provides just enough legitimate service initially to establish credibility. She paused. Can I ask you something personal? I nodded. How long has it been since someone told you that you were special? That you deserved to be happy? The question hit me like a physical blow. I thought about my ex-wife's growing coldness in our final years together, the way she'd made me feel like an inconvenience, a disappointment, a burden she was carrying out of obligation rather than love. A long time, I admitted. That's what she counts on. She finds men who are starved for affection, for validation, for the feeling that someone sees value in them. Then she provides exactly that, in carefully measured doses, until you become emotionally dependent on her approval. So what can I do now? About getting your money back? Probably nothing. About your visa situation? I can try to help, but your options are limited. She consulted her notes. The best I might be able to do is negotiate a voluntary departure instead of formal deportation. That would avoid the lifetime ban and make it possible for you to return to Thailand in the future. How much would that cost? My fee would be $2,000. And there's no guarantee of success. I almost laughed. Even trying to fix the damage Priya had done was going to cost me more money I didn't have. I understand that's expensive, Kun Siraporn said, but if you're formally deported, you'll never be able to visit Thailand again. That might matter to you someday. I need to think about it, of course. But don't wait too long. You only have 4 days left. As I stood to leave, she handed me a business card. There's one more thing. Some of my other clients have formed an informal support group. They meet once a month to share experiences and warn other expats about various scams. Would you be interested in attending? I don't know, maybe. Think about it. Sometimes it helps to talk to people who understand exactly what you've been through. Walking out of that office, I felt somehow both better and worse than when I'd walked in. Better because I now understood that I wasn't uniquely foolish, that I'd been targeted by someone who made a career out of exploitation. Worse because I realized how many other men had suffered the same betrayal and how little justice any of us were likely to see. That evening, I called the number on the business card Kun Siraporn had given me. Hello? The voice was American, probably my age. Hi, this is Milton. The lawyer Kun Siraporn gave me your number. She said you might be willing to talk to someone who's been through a similar situation. Ah. There was a pause. Priya? Yes. How much did she get you for? 3,000. Plus my passport. Could have been worse. She got me for 5 grand before I figured it out. The man's voice was matter of fact, like he was discussing the weather. I'm Dave, by the way, from Perth originally. Milton. From Toronto. Well, Milton from Toronto, welcome to the club nobody wants to join. When do you have to leave? 4 days. Ouch. That's cutting it close. You getting emergency documents from your embassy? Yeah, picking them up tomorrow. Good. Listen, I know this feels like the end of the world right now, but it's not. You'll get through this. How can you be so calm about it? Dave laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Because being angry doesn't change anything. Being embarrassed doesn't get your money back. And beating yourself up doesn't make you any less of a victim. Do you ever think about trying to find her? To get some kind of justice? Every day for the first 6 months. Then I realized that hunting her down would just mean letting her control more of my life than she already had. He paused. Milton, can I give you some advice? Please, don't let her take any more from you than she already has. Don't let her steal your ability to trust people, or your willingness to take chances, or your belief that you deserve happiness. Those things are yours, not hers. That's easier said than done. Yeah, it is. But it's the only way forward that doesn't make her the winner. After I hung up, I sat on my balcony one more time, looking out at the city that had briefly felt like home. Dave was right about one thing. Being angry wouldn't change anything. But forgiveness felt impossible, and moving forward felt like giving up. Tomorrow I would pick up my emergency passport. In 3 days I would board a plane to somewhere else, carrying nothing but the knowledge that I'd been thoroughly fooled by someone who'd made it her profession to break hearts and steal dreams. But tonight, I just wanted to sit in the place where I'd been happiest, even if that happiness had been built on lies. My emergency passport felt strange in my hands, lighter than the original, with fewer pages and an official stamp that marked me as someone who'd lost control of his documents. The embassy worker had been professional but distant, processing my case like one of dozens they handled every week. Your flight to Kuala Lumpur departs at 11 tonight, she'd said, handing me the temporary documents. This passport is valid for 6 months. You'll need to apply for a replacement once you're settled somewhere. Kuala Lumpur. Not because I'd chosen it, but because it was the cheapest flight I could afford with my remaining savings. My retirement dream in Thailand was ending not with a planned transition, but with a desperate escape to wherever I could afford to land. I spent my final morning packing the few belongings I could take with me. Most of the furniture would stay behind. The deposit I'd paid on the apartment was forfeit, and I couldn't afford shipping costs anyway. 30 years of life in Canada, 6 months building a new life in Bangkok, all reduced to 2 suitcases and a carry-on bag. The balcony, where this story began, was where I found myself one last time. The view was the same Bangkok stretching to the horizon, golden temples mixed with glass towers, the river snaking through it all like a promise of adventure. But I couldn't see any of the beauty anymore. All I could see was the scene of my humiliation. You picked the right place to restart your life. Priya's words echoed in my memory, and I wondered how many other men she'd said exactly the same thing to, how many other balconies she'd stood on, playing the same role, delivering the same lines. My phone rang. Unknown Thai number. Hello? Milton? This is Kun Siraporn. I wanted to check on you before your departure. I'm okay. Leaving for the airport in a few hours. I have some news. It might not matter now, but I thought you should know. I waited. The police contacted me this morning. They've received multiple complaints about your Priya, and they're finally opening an investigation. Really? Don't get your hopes up too high. But apparently she made a mistake with her most recent victim. A German businessman who had connections with the Thai Tourism Board. When she scammed him, he made enough noise that the authorities couldn't ignore it anymore. Will I get my money back? Unlikely. But there's a chance she might finally face some consequences. Too late for me. I know. I'm sorry this couldn't have happened sooner. She paused. Milton, I want you to know that several of my other clients have gone on to rebuild their lives successfully. This doesn't have to be the end of your story. It feels like it. I understand. But 6 months from now, a year from now, you might feel differently. After she hung up, I sat in my empty apartment and tried to imagine what 6 months from now would look like. Would I be back in Canada, living in some subsidized senior housing? Would I have found another place to try to build a life? Would I have learned to trust anyone again? The questions felt too big to answer. At 4 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. For just a moment my heart jumped with the impossible hope that it might be Priya, coming to explain everything, to return my money, to reveal that this had all been some terrible misunderstanding. Instead, it was my landlord, coming to do a final inspection of the apartment. Very sorry about your troubles, he said in careful English. Many foreigners have problems with bad people who take advantage. Thank you, you were good tenant. Always paid on time, never made noise, never complained. He looked around the empty space. If you come back to Thailand someday, you call me. I help you find good apartment again. His kindness was unexpected and devastating. After weeks of feeling like a fool, like someone who'd brought this disaster on himself through willful blindness, here was a stranger offering simple human decency. That's very kind of you. Thailand is good country, he said firmly. But like everywhere, has some bad people. Don't judge all of us by one bad person. At 7 o'clock, the taxi arrived to take me to the airport. As we pulled away from the building, I turned for one last look at the balcony, where I'd felt so hopeful just months before. The apartment was dark now, empty, waiting for the next person to fill it with dreams that might or might not come true. The driver tried to make conversation during the ride to the airport. You go home? Vacation finished? Something like that. You like Thailand? I considered the question. Despite everything that had happened, despite the betrayal and the financial loss and the legal nightmare, there had been moments of genuine happiness here. Mornings when the heat felt like an embrace instead of an assault. Evenings when the street food and the chaos and the energy of the city had made me feel more alive than I'd felt in years. Parts of it, I said finally. At the airport, checking in for my flight to Kuala Lumpur, I felt like I was processing my own death. The life I'd tried to build in Bangkok was over, and I had no idea who I would be or where I would go next. The departure gate was full of other travelers, most of them looking excited about their journeys. Families heading on vacation, business travelers with confident expressions, young backpackers setting off on adventures. I envied all of them, their sense of purpose, their belief that travel would bring them something good. When they called my flight, I was one of the first to board. I found my seat, stuffed my carry-on in the overhead bin, and strapped myself in for a journey to a country I knew nothing about, carrying nothing but the clothes on my back and the hard-won knowledge that I was much more vulnerable than I'd ever imagined. As the plane taxied down the runway, I watched Bangkok's lights disappear below us. Somewhere down there, Priya was probably having dinner with her next victim, building trust, telling lies, preparing to break another heart. And there was nothing I could do to stop her. The man next to me was reading a guidebook about Malaysia. First time in KL? He asked. Yes, great city. Very modern, good food, easy to get around. You'll love it. I nodded and closed my eyes, hoping he was right, knowing that love felt like something I might never risk again. The humid air hit me like a wall as I stepped off the plane at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Everything felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, the tropical heat I'd grown accustomed to in Bangkok, but different sounds, different faces, different energy. I was starting over again, except this time I had no consultant to help me, no plan beyond surviving the next few weeks. The visa process at immigration was surprisingly straightforward. Malaysia offered tourists 90 days without advance approval, which felt like a luxury after my legal nightmare in Thailand. The officer stamped my emergency passport without question, and I walked into the arrivals area carrying my 2 suitcases and no idea what came next. I took a taxi to a budget hotel in Bukit Bintang that I'd found online during the flight. $28 a night for a clean room with air conditioning and Wi-Fi. After the spacious apartment I'd been forced to abandon in Bangkok, it felt like a prison cell, but it was shelter while I figured out my next move. "How long you staying?" the desk clerk asked as I checked in. "I don't know yet." He looked at me with the expression of someone who'd seen plenty of Western men wash up in Kuala Lumpur with unclear plans and limited resources. "Monthly rates available if you need." That first week was the loneliest of my life. I walked the streets of KL like a ghost, eating cheap meals in food courts, sitting in air-conditioned malls to escape the heat, trying to make sense of what my life had become. Every morning I woke up in that small hotel room and remembered all over again what had happened. The betrayal, the money, the naive trust that had cost me everything I'd tried to build. I called Dave from Perth, the other victim of Priya who'd talked to me on my last night in Bangkok. "How are you holding up?" he asked. "Not great. I feel like I'm in limbo. That's normal. Took me months to feel human again after she disappeared." He paused. "Where'd you end up?" "Kuala Lumpur." Seemed like the cheapest option. Actually, not a bad choice. Lower cost of living than Bangkok, easier visa situation, good expat community, if you want to connect with people. I'm not sure I want to connect with anyone right now. Also normal. But don't isolate yourself too long. One of the ways she wins is if she makes you afraid to trust anyone ever again. After 2 weeks in the hotel, I found a small apartment in an older building in Bangsar. $600 a month for a 1-bedroom place with basic furniture and a view of other apartment buildings. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and no one could take it away from me as long as I paid the rent. The landlord was a Chinese Malaysian woman in her 60s who spoke perfect English and asked no questions about why a Canadian retiree had shown up in her building with minimal possessions and no long-term plan. "First month, last month, and deposit," she said matter-of-factly. "Rent due on the 1st. Any problems, you call me." That night, sitting in my empty apartment with a beer from the 7-Eleven downstairs, I tried to assess my situation honestly. My savings were severely depleted by Priya's theft and the costs of emergency travel. My pension would cover basic living expenses in Malaysia, but there wasn't much margin for error. I was legally allowed to stay for 90 days at a time as a tourist, but I'd need to leave the country periodically to reset my visa status. More importantly, I had to decide who I was going to be now. The optimistic retiree who'd moved to Bangkok full of dreams seemed like a different person, someone I couldn't access anymore. But the bitter, withdrawn man I was becoming didn't feel like someone I wanted to be either. I started walking every morning, partly for exercise but mostly because movement felt better than sitting still with my thoughts. Kuala Lumpur was easier to navigate than Bangkok, cleaner, more organized, with better English signage everywhere. But it also felt less alive somehow, more sterile, like a city designed for efficiency rather than joy. After a month, I realized I hadn't spoken to another human being about anything meaningful since arriving. Conversations with shopkeepers and restaurant servers didn't count. I was becoming invisible to myself, existing without really living. That's when I decided to try something I'd never done before. I joined a gym. The fitness center in my neighborhood was basic but clean, full of serious-looking locals and a handful of expats trying to stay in shape in the tropical heat. I signed up for a month-to-month membership and started going every day, not because I was particularly motivated to get fit, but because it gave me somewhere to be, something to do with the angry energy that had nowhere else to go. "You're new here." The voice belonged to a British man, about my age, who was using the exercise bike next to mine. "I'm Roger." "Milton." "Canadian? How'd you know?" "The apologetic way you asked if this machine was available." He smiled. "Been in KL long?" "About 6 weeks." "Retirement?" I paused, not sure how to answer that question anymore. Something like that? Roger didn't push for details, but over the following weeks, we fell into a routine of exercising at the same time and exchanging brief conversations. He'd been living in Malaysia for 3 years, having moved from London after his wife died. Couldn't stand the thought of another gray winter, he explained one morning. Figured I'd rather be hot and lonely than cold and lonely. Are you? Lonely, I mean, sometimes, but less than I was in London. He paused his workout to look at me directly. What about you? You've got the look of someone who's been through something difficult. I'd been dreading this moment for weeks, the point where someone would ask direct questions and I'd have to decide whether to tell the truth or keep hiding behind vague explanations. I got scammed, I said finally. In Bangkok, lost a lot of money and had to leave the country. Ah, Roger nodded like this was completely normal. Romance scam? How did you? Happens all the time out here. Western men, usually recently single, fall for local women who turn out to be professional con artists. His voice was matter of fact, not judgmental. You're not the first person I've met who's been through it. You don't think I'm an idiot? For wanting someone to care about you? For believing that someone beautiful and intelligent might genuinely like you? Roger shook his head. Mate, that doesn't make you an idiot. That makes you human. It was the first time anyone had said that without it feeling like pity or condescension. Coming from someone who'd chosen to rebuild his life in a foreign country after loss, it carried weight. The worst part isn't the money, I said. It's the feeling that I can't trust my own judgment anymore. I understand that. When Margaret died, I spent months second-guessing every decision, every memory, wondering if I'd missed signs of her illness that I should have caught. He resumed pedaling slowly, but eventually you realize that doubt is just another kind of prison. How do you get past it? By accepting that you'll probably make more mistakes, but that making mistakes is better than making nothing at all. That conversation changed something for me. Not everything, not overnight, but something. For the first time since leaving Bangkok, I started to consider the possibility that this wasn't the end of my story, just a very difficult chapter. 3 months after arriving in Kuala Lumpur, I was still living day to day, still avoiding any decisions that required long-term planning. But I was also sleeping better, eating regularly, and having occasional conversations with people like Roger who didn't make me feel like a cautionary tale. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was survival. And some days, survival felt like enough. The message came through line at 3 in the morning, 3 months after I'd deleted Priya's contact information and tried to forget she'd ever existed. I almost didn't check it. Notifications in the middle of the night were usually spam or wrong numbers, but something made me reach for my phone. The sender was listed as anonymous and the message was short. You should see this. Attached were screenshots. The first showed a Facebook profile with a familiar face using the name Prewa instead of Priya. Same smile, same confident expression, same professional-looking photo. The profile description read, Visa consultant with 20 years experience, specializing in retirement visas for Western expats. Testimonials available upon request. My hand started shaking as I scrolled through the other screenshots. Posts in various expat Facebook groups, all dated within the last month. Experienced visa agent available for hassle-free processing. Let me handle your immigration needs while you enjoy Thailand. Competitive rates, personal service, satisfaction guaranteed. She was back. Using a slightly different name, but the same face, the same promises, the same hunting grounds where she'd found me. The final screenshot showed her having coffee with a Western man who looked to be in his 70s. They were both leaning over paperwork spread across the table, and she was pointing to specific documents with the same helpful expression I remembered so well. The timestamp on the photo was from 2 days ago. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. Someone else was walking into the same trap. Some other lonely retiree was probably feeling grateful right now for finding such a competent, caring consultant. Someone who might even be developing feelings for her, the way I had. Without thinking, I started typing a response to the anonymous sender. Who is this? How did you get these photos? The reply came immediately. Friend of a friend who recognized her from your story. Thought you should know she's still active. Do you know who the man in the photo is? No, but someone in the expat community might. Are you going to warn him? I stared at that question for a long time. Warn him how? Message a stranger on Facebook to tell him that the woman helping with his visa was actually a professional scammer? Who would believe something like that from an anonymous contact? More importantly, did I want to get involved? For 3 months, I'd been trying to rebuild some sense of peace, some ability to trust my own judgment again. Did I really want to dive back into Priya's world, even to help someone else? But as I looked at the photo of her with her next victim, all I could think about was how hopeful I'd felt during those early meetings, how grateful I'd been for her help, how special she'd made me feel. This man deserved to know what he was walking into. I spent the rest of that sleepless night researching. The Facebook profile led me to other social media accounts, which led me to posts in various expat groups where she was actively promoting her services. Always professional, always helpful, always just building enough credibility to hook the next victim. By morning, I'd found 3 separate posts where different Western men were praising Prewa for her excellent service. Recent posts, all glowing testimonials, all probably from men who didn't yet realize what was coming. I called Dave in Perth. It was early for him too, but this felt urgent. Milton, what's wrong? She's back. Priya. Using a different name but the same operation. Of course she is. Did you think she'd retired? I have photos of her with what looks like her next victim. And I'm thinking about warning him. Dave was quiet for a moment. Mate, I understand the impulse. But think about this carefully. Do you really want to open that door again? What if it was you? Wouldn't you want someone to warn you? Maybe. But I also wouldn't necessarily believe them. When you're in the middle of being charmed by someone like her, warnings from strangers sound like jealousy or craziness. He was probably right. If someone had contacted me during those early weeks with Priya, claiming she was a scammer, I would have dismissed them as a disgruntled ex-client or someone with ulterior motives. But I couldn't stop thinking about the man in the photograph, the way he was studying the documents she was showing him, trusting her expertise, probably feeling relieved that someone so competent was taking care of his complicated situation. That afternoon, I created a fake Facebook account and spent an hour crafting a message to the man I'd seen in the photos. I kept it simple, factual, not accusatory. I don't know you, but I saw you recently with a visa consultant calling herself Prewa. I had a very bad experience with this same woman using the name Priya. She took my money and passport and never filed any paperwork. Please be careful and maybe get a second opinion before giving her any payments or documents. I stared at that message for 20 minutes before deleting it. Dave was right. It would sound crazy, desperate, like the ravings of someone who couldn't accept that his relationship had ended. Instead, I started documenting everything. Screenshots of her new profiles, records of the posts I'd found, copies of the photos showing her with potential victims. I created a file with all the information I'd gathered about her operation, both from my own experience and from what I'd learned from other victims through Kuhn's Siraporn. If I wasn't going to warn individual victims, maybe I could at least create a resource for people who went looking for information about her. I posted a detailed warning in several expat Facebook groups, using my real name and photo to establish credibility. I described exactly what had happened to me, provided screenshots of her current profiles, and encouraged anyone considering using her services to be extremely careful. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, I had messages from other men who'd been scammed by her, some using the name Priya, others using names I'd never heard. The scope of her operation was much larger than I'd realized. She got me for $6,000 last year. One message read, "Use the name Ploy that time." Same MO exactly. "I'm the German businessman who finally got the police to pay attention." Another wrote, "Your post confirms everything I told them. She's been doing this for years." But the message that stopped me cold came from someone claiming to be her current victim. "This is bullshit. Prewa is helping me and she's legitimate. You're obviously just bitter about your relationship ending. Stop trying to sabotage her business." I stared at that message for a long time. It was probably the man from the photographs, defending the woman who was in the process of scamming him. I could have tried to argue with him, provided more evidence, pushed harder to make him see the truth. Instead, I closed Facebook and went for a walk. 3 days later, I got another anonymous message. The man in the photos just posted in a visa group asking for help. She disappeared with his passport and $5,000. I found his post easily. The same man who'd accused me of being bitter was now desperately asking for advice about a missing consultant and invalid visa paperwork. The responses were sympathetic but largely unhelpful, the same story playing out again, with the same predictable ending. I wanted to feel vindicated, but mostly I just felt tired. Another life disrupted, another retirement dream shattered, another man learning the hard way that trust could be weaponized against him. That evening, I got a direct message from him. "You were right. I'm sorry I didn't listen." I stared at that apology for a long time before typing back, "I'm sorry you had to learn this way. Are you okay?" "No. But I will be. Thank you for trying to warn people. Take care of yourself, and don't let her take anything more from you than she already has." "What do you mean?" "Don't let her make you afraid to trust anyone ever again. That's how she really wins." I closed the laptop and walked out onto the small balcony of my Kuala Lumpur apartment. The view wasn't much other apartment buildings, a slice of busy street, no golden temples or romantic river scenes. But it was honest. Real. Mine. For the first time in months, I felt something that might have been peace. Not because I'd gotten revenge on Priya, or because another victim had been warned, but because I'd done what I could with the knowledge I had. I'd spoken the truth even when it was difficult, even when people didn't want to hear it. She was still out there, probably charming her next victim right now. There would be more casualties, more broken dreams, more men learning painful lessons about trust and vulnerability. I couldn't stop all of that, but I could stop letting her control my story. I deleted the anonymous contact who'd sent me the screenshots. I left the warning posts up in the Facebook groups but stopped monitoring the responses. I blocked Priya's new profile so I wouldn't be tempted to keep tracking her activities. Some battles are worth fighting. Others are just ways of staying trapped in someone else's war. 6 months after fleeing Bangkok in shame and desperation, I was finally ready to start building something new. Not the retirement dream I'd originally imagined, but something more realistic, more sustainable, more honest about the risks and rewards of starting over at 65. I had learned the hard way that trust is both essential and dangerous. That loneliness can make you vulnerable to people who understand exactly how to exploit that vulnerability. That love and manipulation can look almost identical from the inside. But I had also learned that survival is possible, that shame doesn't have to be permanent, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let someone else's cruelty define the rest of your life. Priya had taken my money, my passport, and my naive faith that people always mean what they say, but she hadn't taken everything. I was still here, still breathing, still capable of learning and growing and maybe even trusting again someday. That would have to be enough. The next morning, I called Roger from the gym and asked if he wanted to have coffee sometime. Not because I was ready for a deep friendship or because I thought he could fix what had been broken in me, but because isolation was just another kind of prison. "I'd like that," he said. "There's a good place near the gym. How about tomorrow morning?" "Tomorrow morning sounds perfect." As I hung up the phone, I realized I meant it. For the first time in months, tomorrow felt like something to look forward to, rather than just another day to survive. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I first stepped onto that balcony in Bangkok, full of hope and possibility, but it was an ending I could live with. More importantly, it felt like the beginning of something new, something real, something mine, something that no one could take away from me unless I let them. And I wasn't going to let them.